I want to share a paranormal experience that I will never forget. I was born in a Gulf country, but we moved to Europe when I was a child. My family is originally from Karachi, Pakistan, and we visit Pakistan every year. In 2018, we visited Pakistan during the holidays, and we were supposed to stay in our new penthouse, which we had just built and spent a lot of money on. However, just a few days before we arrived, there was a blackout in Karachi, and the entire city had no electricity for the whole night. When the power went out, something happened that I will never forget. I was going out with some friends, and while on the way, I needed to use the restroom. Since we were already on the road but near home, I told my friends, let's go back home quickly, I need to use the washroom. They suggested I use the restroom in a nearby street, saying it'll only take 2 minutes. Now let me explain that in our area, every main street has a small back alley that's hardly used by anyone. People throw garbage there, and only the garbage collectors visit to take it away. I quickly got out of the car and went into the back alley to use the restroom. After finishing, I joined my friends and we went out. We returned home around 4 a.m. When I got home, the generator and hubs were off, and everyone was sleeping on the terrace. I went to the terrace, lay down, and fell asleep. The electricity came back on during the early morning hours, and everyone went downstairs. Instead of going to my room, I fell asleep on the sofa in the drawing room. Not long after, I felt something heavy on top of me, as though someone was choking me. I tried to open my eyes but couldn't. The drawing room light was off, as I had switched it off before going to sleep. In the darkness, I could see a black shadow leaning over me. I couldn't scream because my throat was being squeezed. In a moment of courage, I tried to move, and just then, my sister-in-law, who was coming to pray, heard me. She turned on the light and called my name. As soon as the light came on, that thing disappeared. I quickly got up, terrified. My sister-in-law screamed, and the rest of the family rushed to the drawing room. When I told them what had happened, they tried to reassure me, saying it's just your imagination, or maybe you were dreaming. After that, I went to my room and slept. But every night during my stay in Pakistan, I would sit in the drawing room to see if that thing would come back, but nothing happened. After the holiday, I returned to Europe. My parents and siblings stayed in Pakistan. They would visit me often. A few days after I returned to Europe, my dad had a connecting flight and stayed with me for 3 days. I picked him up from the airport, and we spent a pleasant day together. That night, we fell asleep while watching a movie in the living room. Later that night, the same thing happened to me as it had in Pakistan. I suddenly felt like something was choking me. I tried to scream, waking my dad. He turned on the light and saw my distressed condition. He said, "You're not sleeping properly." This is sleep paralysis, however. After my dad left, the episodes became more frequent. Every couple of days, I would experience sleep paralysis. I adjusted my routine, didn't stress much, and focused on my health, but it kept happening. I began to feel as if something was always around me, watching me. One night, while watching a movie in the dark, I paused the video to go to the washroom. As I entered the dark hallway, I suddenly saw a large, heavy shadow standing there. I froze for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. Then, suddenly it disappeared. I gathered my courage, went to the washroom, and returned to bed, covering myself with a blanket and turning on some relaxing music. But sleep didn't come easily. I had felt the presence fully while awake. The next morning, I woke up to a call from a friend who said he was busy, and I had to take his wife to an interview. The interview was in a place with limited public transport, so I agreed. After showering, I pulled out a white t-shirt from the laundry that had been washed and ironed. To my shock, I noticed red spots on it. I thought it might have come from the laundry. I checked the other shirts, and they all had the same red spots. It couldn't be a coincidence. I quickly grabbed a dark shirt and left. I didn't know that another strange incident was waiting for me. When I reached my car, I noticed that the same red spots were on the door on the driver's side. I quickly wiped them off and left. Everything was fine as I took my friend's wife to the interview, but on the way back, my car's tire suddenly burst on the highway, and the car skidded dangerously. Miraculously, the car stopped safely at the side of the road, as though someone had placed it there. My friend's wife and I were both silent, looking at each other in shock. After a few minutes, when we came to our senses, we got out to check, and the tire was completely flat, though it had been brand new just a few days ago. Later, I took the car to the garage where the mechanic, an Indian worker, said, "Do you chew pan?" I replied, "No." "Why do you ask?" he said. "There were pawn stains on your car door." He changed the tire and serviced the car. Later that day, when I arrived home and opened the door, I smelled blood coming from the house. I opened the windows and sprayed air freshener. But when I went to the cupboard, I noticed red liquid dripping from the inside of the cupboard door. When I touched it, it smelled like blood. I was terrified and checked the entire house, including the balcony, but couldn't find any explanation. I called my mom and told her everything. She insisted I pray and seek protection through Dua. But nothing helped, and I began hearing footsteps and sounds in the house, even though I was alone. For the next few days, I couldn't stay at home and decided to stay in a hotel. But strange things continued to happen there too. I felt a presence with me all the time, and I would hear footsteps, sometimes slow, sometimes fast. After a few days, I decided to return home, gathering the courage to face whatever was happening. But as I reached the corridor of my apartment, my neighbor, an elderly woman, confronted me. She said, "You've been making a lot of noise lately and your uncle can't sleep. Also, when you knock on your door, you don't answer, and we've been waiting for you." I was confused and told her, "Auntie, I've been staying in a hotel for the last 5 days. See, I have my suitcase with me." She didn't believe me and asked me to call the police. I called them, and when they arrived, they found everything normal in the house. There were no signs of anyone having entered, and nothing had been disturbed. But this didn't end there. A few days later, I returned home to find a large cat sitting on the dining table. It stared at me for a few seconds, then walked towards me and disappeared down the corridor. I was shaken. I called my mom to tell her about it. She advised me to pray and stay strong. Despite everything, I still felt like something was with me all the time.